My name is Irene Lett, and I'm 32 years old. 5 years ago, my sister, Monica, made a choice that would haunt me for years to come. She lied to our parents, telling them that I had dropped out of medical school. It wasn't a small misunderstanding, it was a complete fabrication. That one lie destroyed my relationship with my family. My parents cut me off without hesitation. They blocked my number, skipped my graduation, and weren't even there when I got married. For 5 years, I was no one's daughter. But just last month, everything changed. Monica, the same sister who had caused my erasure from the family, was rushed to the emergency room. She was unconscious, losing blood, and slipping into shock. As the trauma team called for the chief surgeon, I stepped through those doors. And when my mother saw my name on the white coat, she froze. She grabbed my father's arm so tightly that it left bruises. Before we dive deeper, take a moment to like and subscribe. This story might hit home for you, especially if you've ever felt misunderstood or abandoned by family. Drop your location and local time in the comments too. I want to know where you are as you listen to this. Let's rewind to 2019, to the last time my father ever looked at me with pride. That was the beginning of everything. Growing up, my family had 2 daughters. But it always felt like there was only one that mattered, Monica. 3 years older than me, she was the shining star in the family. From a young age, she was the performer. School plays, student council, charm, she had it all. And my parents, Jerry and Diane Lett, adored her for it. They worked hard, Dad at a manufacturing plant, and Mom doing part-time bookkeeping, but they valued appearances above everything else. And Monica made them proud every day. As for me, I was the quiet one. The bookworm. The one who would bury herself in textbooks while Monica stole the show. I didn't make waves, but I wasn't exactly noticed either. I wasn't rebellious or difficult. I was just invisible. Not forgotten, but always in the background. And I hated it. I hated being ignored. But I convinced myself it didn't matter. I convinced myself that if I just kept my head down and worked hard enough, they would notice me one day. I thought that my grades and accomplishments would eventually make me someone they couldn't ignore. I remember one moment clearly. In 8th grade, I was the only student from my school to make it to the state science fair. The same weekend, Monica had a community theater performance. My parents, of course, went to see her. When I came home with my second-place ribbon, Dad barely glanced at it. "That's nice, Ray," he said. He didn't ask me what my project was about. He didn't ask anything. At that moment, I told myself it didn't hurt. But deep down, I wanted more. I wanted them to care. I wanted them to notice me. So, I kept pushing forward. I focused on my studies and did everything I could to get noticed, not through loudness or spectacle, but through sheer achievement. I thought if I couldn't be the daughter they wanted, I'd be the daughter they couldn't ignore. And it almost worked. The day I received my acceptance letter from Oregon Health and Science University's medical program, everything started to change. It was a Tuesday in April, and Monica was visiting for the weekend. She was 22, working at a marketing firm, nothing extraordinary. But when Dad read the letter aloud, his eyebrows shot up. Oregon Health and Science. "That's a real medical school," he said slowly, tasting the words. And for the first time in my life, my father looked at me, really looked at me, and said, "Maybe you'll make something of yourself after all, Renese." It wasn't the compliment I had always hoped for, but it was the closest thing I had ever received. For once, I felt seen. I felt like I mattered. Mom couldn't contain her excitement. She called Aunt Ruth, neighbors, even distant relatives. Irene got into medical school. Can you believe it? Her voice had a pitch I'd never heard before, genuine pride. And for the first time, I felt like I wasn't invisible. But across the table, Monica's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. It wasn't a smile of happiness. It was something else. Something more calculating. At the time, I didn't know it, but Monica was already plotting her next move. And when I least expected it, she would tear everything apart. Ever felt like you've done everything right only to watch someone tear it all down? Keep reading, because the story is about to get a lot darker. Growing up, I never questioned the fact that Monica was the star of the family. There were 2 daughters in the Lett household, but only one ever seemed to matter. Monica was 3 years older than me, and from the very beginning, it was clear that she was the one who got all the attention. She excelled at everything: school plays, student council, social gatherings. She had this magnetic energy about her, the kind of person who could walk into any room and instantly capture everyone's focus. My parents, Jerry and Diane Lett, adored her for it. They loved how she could entertain, lead, and charm. Dad worked long hours managing a manufacturing plant, and Mom was the part-time bookkeeper. They weren't wealthy, but they took pride in the life they had built in Hartford, Connecticut. Theirs was a world where appearances meant everything. And Monica delivered on that front perfectly. Then there was me, always in the background. I wasn't rebellious. I didn't cause trouble. I just didn't stand out. I was the quiet one, the bookworm. While Monica was talking at the dinner table, making everyone laugh with her witty stories, I had my nose buried in my textbooks. I wasn't a nuisance, but I wasn't noticed either. I had no idea how it felt to be the child who could do no wrong. Monica was always the one who got all the praise, all the recognition. She was the child everyone talked about. At holidays, I sat at the table with my biology textbooks while Monica effortlessly held court, making everyone laugh and asking for second helpings of dessert. My parents adored her. But when I achieved something significant, they barely noticed. I had one memory that still stings to this day. In 8th grade, I made it to the state science fair, the only student from our school. It was a huge achievement for me. But that same weekend, Monica had a community theater performance. Guess where my parents went? They went to see her show. When I came home with my second-place ribbon, Dad gave me a fleeting glance. "That's nice, Ray," he said. No questions about what my project was about, no interest in the research I had spent hours working on. I told myself it didn't hurt, but it did. It hurt more than I ever let on. I wanted recognition. I wanted someone to see the work I was doing, the effort I was putting in. But I didn't get that. So, I threw myself into my studies. If they weren't going to notice me for who I was, maybe I could be noticed for what I could achieve. I thought if I became someone extraordinary, they would have no choice but to acknowledge me. That thought kept me going for years. I poured myself into my academics. The harder I worked, the more invisible I seemed to become in my own family. Monica was the loud, charming one, the one who never had to try to be noticed. I was the quiet, diligent one, and I didn't understand why that wasn't enough. I told myself it didn't matter. I would prove them wrong, I thought. I would be someone they could never ignore. Then came the day I received my acceptance letter to Oregon Health and Science University's medical program. For the first time, I was the one in the spotlight. It was a Tuesday in April, and Monica was visiting for the weekend. I remember that day so clearly because it changed everything. When Dad read the letter out loud, he couldn't hide his surprise. "Oregon Health and Science, that's a real medical school," he said slowly, almost like he was tasting the words. Then he turned to me. Maybe you'll make something of yourself after all, Renese. It wasn't the grand compliment I had always imagined. But it was something. It was the closest thing to approval I had ever received from him. And I clung to those 5 words like a lifeline. For the first time, I felt like maybe I mattered. Mom immediately called Aunt Ruth, 2 neighbors, and several people at work. Irene got into medical school, she repeated. I could hear the pride in her voice. I felt like I had finally earned my place in this family. But then I looked at Monica. She was smiling, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. It wasn't the smile of a proud sister. It was a smile of something else, something darker. And I didn't see it then, but I would soon. I thought my hard work had finally paid off, but Monica was already plotting her next move. And this time, it wasn't just about taking the spotlight. It was about destroying the only thing I had left. Ever been caught in the crossfire of sibling rivalry? Keep reading to find out how Irene's success became the catalyst for betrayal. When I received the acceptance letter to Oregon Health and Science University's medical program, I thought everything was about to change for the better. For the first time in my life, I felt seen. I had worked so hard to prove my worth to my parents, and in that moment, I thought they were finally proud of me. Dad had even looked at me with something resembling approval, and Mom couldn't stop bragging about my achievement. It was the recognition I had always craved. But across the table, Monica's smile didn't match the celebration. Her eyes didn't gleam with excitement like everyone else's. No, there was something darker there. Something calculating. At that moment, I didn't realize what was happening. I thought maybe I had been wrong about her. Maybe my getting into medical school had finally unlocked something between us, respect, perhaps, or even connection. For the next few days, Monica started calling me more. It was odd, to say the least. She started asking about my medical school, my schedule, my professors, who my roommates were. She was so interested in every tiny detail, remembering names and little facts I'd mentioned in passing. I thought she was genuinely starting to care, genuinely interested in me. I thought maybe this was the breakthrough we needed to finally connect as sisters. I had been wrong. What I didn't know at the time was that Monica wasn't interested in connecting. She wasn't interested in my life at all. She was gathering ammunition, every detail about my life, every vulnerability I shared with her. And I handed it to her without even thinking. It wasn't until my 3rd year of medical school that everything started to fall apart. My best friend and roommate, Sarah Mitchell, was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. Sarah had grown up in foster care and had no family to lean on. I was her only support. I took a formal leave of absence to care for her, moving into her apartment, driving her to chemotherapy, and sitting by her side through every painful moment. I called Monica to tell her what had happened, to explain that I had to step away from school for a while. Monica, in her syrupy sweet voice, said the words I didn't want to hear, but I still believed her. "Oh, Ray, I'm so sorry. Take all the time you need. I'll make sure to keep Mom and Dad in the loop. They don't need to worry about this." Her voice was comforting, too comforting, but I took her words at face value. I thought that, finally, she was being supportive, being the sister I had always wanted. I had no idea that, 3 days later, Monica would destroy everything. That night, I was sitting by Sarah's hospital bed when I received a call from my dad. His voice was cold. Flat. "Irene," he began, his words slow and deliberate, "your sister told us everything." "Everything?" I repeated, confused. My heart began to race. The boyfriend, the dropping out, all of it. She showed us the proof. The messages. The lies. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I tried to explain. I tried to tell him the truth. I had documentation of my leave of absence from the university. I had emails. I had official paperwork. But none of it mattered. They didn't listen. They refused to listen. My mother's voice broke through the call, shaking as she said, "Irene, how could you do this to us? How could you lie for a whole year?" "Mom, I didn't lie. I filed for a leave of absence. You can call the dean. I'm telling you the truth." But the line went dead before I could finish. I sat in the hospital for another 20 minutes, my heart pounding, my phone still showing the call duration, 4 minutes and 12 seconds. That's how long it took my parents to erase me from their lives. And then, a text message came through from Monica, "I'm sorry, Renese. I had to tell them. I couldn't keep your secret anymore." It wasn't an apology. It was the final blow. And I knew, with crushing certainty, that my sister had just destroyed everything. For 5 years, I had tried to remain part of the family, even from 3,000 miles away. I had tried to explain, tried to reach them. But now, Monica had made sure they believed I was the one who had abandoned them. I couldn't understand it. I couldn't comprehend how Monica had turned my life into a lie. For the next 5 days, I tried everything. I called my parents 14 times. The first 3 went straight to voicemail. Dad's number was blocked. Mom's number was blocked a couple of days later. I sent emails, one short, one long. The long one had my leave of absence paperwork attached, as well as the dean's direct phone number and Sarah's oncologist's contact information. I wanted them to know the truth. But they didn't respond. They didn't care enough to respond. I even wrote a handwritten letter and mailed it priority. I thought it might make a difference. But it came back 5 days later, unopened. The envelope was marked "Return to Sender," and I recognized my mother's handwriting. The pain was unbearable, but it wasn't over yet. The damage had been done, and Monica had made sure of it. I called Aunt Ruth, Dad's younger sister, the only person in the family who had ever treated me like I mattered equally. She promised to talk to Dad, but when she called back, her voice was heavy with defeat. He said to stay out of it. He said, "You've made your bed." That's when it hit me. Monica didn't just lie once and move on. She had orchestrated this entire thing. She had built an entire narrative around me. She made sure I wasn't just erased from the family. She made sure I was forgotten completely. Have you ever felt betrayed by the person you trusted most? Stick with me, because the truth is about to come crashing down in ways you won't expect. It was clear to me now that Monica's betrayal wasn't just about one lie. It wasn't just about convincing our parents that I had dropped out of medical school. No, this had been a carefully crafted plan, executed with such precision that it left me completely vulnerable. For 5 years, I had tried to explain myself, but no matter how hard I tried to prove the truth, Monica's story always prevailed. It wasn't just that she had lied about my life, it was that she had built a false reality around me, one that made my family believe I was the problem. They thought I had abandoned them, refused to speak to them, and dropped out of school. She had created an entire web of deceit, and it had been so well spun that even when I tried to reach out, they turned their backs on me. For the first time, I realized that this wasn't a simple sibling rivalry. Monica had a campaign, a strategy to ensure she remained the perfect daughter, the one who had never strayed from their expectations. She wasn't just trying to make me invisible, she was actively erasing me from their lives, all while making them believe she was the one who had been wronged. I couldn't help but feel betrayed in a way I had never imagined possible. This wasn't just jealousy or sibling rivalry, it was a systematic attempt to destroy me, to make me out to be someone I wasn't. I wasn't just the quiet, ignored daughter anymore. I was the bad daughter, the one who had abandoned her family, the one who had cut them out of my life. What was worse was that I had no idea how far Monica had gone to keep this lie alive. She had manipulated every conversation, every holiday gathering, making sure that the story she told was the one that stuck. I hadn't just been forgotten, I had been vilified. One of the hardest things to accept was that this wasn't the first time it had happened. This was a pattern. The entire course of my life, all the moments I had worked so hard for, had been overshadowed by Monica's version of events. Every achievement of mine had been dismissed, every effort to explain myself ignored. The science fair in 8th grade, my medical school acceptance, even my residency graduation, all of it had been overshadowed by Monica's narrative of who I was and who I wasn't. It was as if none of it had ever happened. After the phone call, after the text from Monica apologizing for telling the truth, I spent the next few days in a daze. I couldn't believe that my own sister had done this to me. I couldn't believe that my parents, the people I had tried so hard to make proud, had not only believed her lies, but had cast me aside without a second thought. They didn't even bother to check the facts. They just accepted what Monica told them as truth. But I couldn't keep chasing after them. I realized that they had already made their choice. They had chosen to believe the version of events that was easiest for them to accept. And Monica had made sure that was the version they believed. It was at that moment that I stopped trying. I stopped calling. I stopped emailing. I stopped pleading for them to understand. I had given them every piece of evidence I could, every document, every phone call, every email, but none of it mattered. The truth had been buried under 5 years of Monica's lies, and there was no room left for me in their world. But that didn't mean I was going to give up. It didn't mean I was going to let Monica win. If I couldn't have my family's support, then I would have to find a way to rebuild my life without them. I focused on school. I focused on my career. I had Sarah to take care of, and she was my priority now. It wasn't easy, being away from my family, taking care of a friend who was dying, but I had to keep going. I couldn't afford to let this destroy me, not when Sarah needed me. But I couldn't shake the feeling of being torn apart. Every call I made to my parents was unanswered. Every letter, every email, every text came back rejected. I had nothing left to give them. Nothing left to prove. And I realized something in that moment. This wasn't about me anymore. It wasn't about proving I was a good daughter. This was about me becoming who I needed to be, without their approval, without their love. And that was the hardest part, realizing that I could build a life without them. How do you rebuild when everything you've worked for is destroyed by the ones who were supposed to love you the most? Stay with me because the story isn't over yet. As the days and weeks passed, I found myself caught between two worlds, the life I had fought so hard to build, and the family I no longer had. There was no denying the pain that came from being rejected by the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. Every achievement I had earned, every success I had achieved felt hollow because they weren't there to witness it. My medical school acceptance, my residency graduation, my wedding, none of it was celebrated by the people who mattered most. But I didn't have time to wallow in self-pity. I had a responsibility. Sarah, my best friend, was fighting for her life, and she needed me now more than ever. She had been diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer, and despite everything I was going through, I knew I had to be there for her. I became her caregiver, her support system. The only family I had left was her. And so, I threw myself into caring for Sarah, even when it meant sacrificing my own emotional well-being. I moved into her apartment, driving her to chemotherapy sessions and sitting with her through sleepless nights as she endured the agony of her treatment. In a strange way, it felt like I was the one who had to keep going, for both of us. My medical school program had been put on hold for a semester, but I couldn't let it derail me. I wasn't going to let my entire life fall apart just because my family had abandoned me. If I had to do it alone, I would. Still, the emptiness was always there. The silence between me and my family grew louder with every passing day. I called my parents multiple times, left messages, sent emails. I even sent handwritten letters, one priority mail, with all the proof that I was telling the truth. But nothing came back. No answers, no calls, no signs that they cared. It was during this time that I learned the harsh reality: I was on my own. I couldn't keep chasing after a family who had already decided their version of events. I had given them every opportunity to understand, but they refused to listen. Monica had planted a seed of doubt in their minds, and it had grown into something irreversible. In December, after Sarah's condition worsened, I found myself standing at a hospital, holding Sarah's hand as she passed away. I was the only one in the room. No family came, no one called to check on me. It was just me, in the silence of the hospital room, watching my best friend take her final breath. It was the hardest thing I had ever done. When Sarah died, I felt the weight of her absence in a way that was hard to put into words. But it wasn't just Sarah's death that left me broken, it was the realization that my family had chosen to remain silent. They had chosen to believe a lie, and I was left to pick up the pieces of a life that no longer had their support. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. I had Sarah's encouragement, her belief in me. I found the strength to move forward because I knew I had to. I re-enrolled in medical school in January. No family to support me, no safety net. Just me, picking up the pieces of my shattered life. I took on extra student loans, picked up a part-time research assistant position, and ate hospital cafeteria leftovers more times than I care to admit. I worked like my life depended on it because, in many ways, it did. Medical school didn't stop for personal tragedy. Anatomy exams didn't get postponed because your best friend had just died. Clinical rotations didn't ease up because you had no family to cheer you on. I had to keep going. I had to prove that I was more than the girl they had written off. But in the silence of those long nights, in the solitude of my apartment, I couldn't help but feel the absence of everything I had lost. The family who should have been there for me, the sister who had betrayed me, the mother and father who had turned their backs, I couldn't undo any of it. I had no choice but to keep moving forward. Graduation came, and as expected, no one from Hartford showed up. Not Monica. Not my parents. Aunt Ruth was the only one who came, and it was a bittersweet moment. She had always been the only one who treated me like I mattered equally. But even her presence couldn't fill the emptiness that lingered in my heart. I matched into a surgical residency at Mercy Rest Medical Center, one of the busiest trauma centers on the East Coast, and I couldn't help but feel the irony. Monica had built a life based on lies, and now, I was the one who had achieved everything she could never take from me. I had built my life from nothing, from the ground up. I had survived without the family who should have been there, and now, I was about to enter a new chapter, one where I was in control. But as much as I had built my own life, the shadow of my family's absence loomed large. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. Every Thanksgiving, I set the table and counted the plates, feeling the absence of the family that should have been there. I had come so far, and yet, the ache of being disowned by the people who should have loved me never fully went away. Do you think you could ever rebuild a broken relationship with your family after being cast aside? Keep reading to see how Irene's life is about to take another unexpected turn. Life has a strange way of taking you down paths you never expect. In a lot of ways, my life was a series of twists and turns, each one more painful than the last. But as I stood at the crossroads of grief and success, I realized something: success didn't feel like success when it was achieved in isolation. I had made it through medical school, I had earned my residency, but what good was any of it if I didn't have the people I loved to share it with? I had spent 5 years building a life without my family. I had focused on my career, my patience, and my personal growth, all while ignoring the fact that the people who should have been my greatest supporters were the ones who had turned their backs on me. Every success felt tainted by their absence, but I had convinced myself that I didn't need them. I didn't need anyone. I was fine on my own. But that's the thing about life, it doesn't give you a choice sometimes. Sometimes, the people you think you've lost forever find their way back, in the most unexpected ways. It started with a phone call from Aunt Ruth. She had been my only lifeline throughout the years, the only person who truly understood what I had been through. It was a Sunday afternoon when I picked up the phone, thinking it was just another routine check-in. "Irene," she said, her voice cautious but urgent, "there's something you need to know about Monica." I froze. The words caught in my throat. I hadn't heard from Monica in years. The last I knew, she had been continuing her life in Hartford, living out the narrative she had created, the one where she had successfully erased me from the family. The last thing I expected was for Aunt Ruth to call and tell me something about Monica that would change everything. "She's been keeping a secret, Irene. A big one." I listened in shock as Aunt Ruth explained how Monica had been lying about more than just me. She had been telling people in the family that I was the one who had abandoned them. But she had taken it further. She had manipulated their perception of me by telling them I was living in a state of self-destruction, that I had dropped out of school, had a drug problem, and that I was, essentially, a failure. But the truth was even darker than I had imagined. Monica hadn't just been telling lies about me, she had been actively trying to sabotage my future. Aunt Ruth had been piecing the puzzle together for years, and what she discovered was horrifying. Monica had gone so far as to make fake inquiries to my medical school, trying to get them to revoke my leave of absence. She had used a fake name to contact the school, trying to get them to question my credentials and the legitimacy of my leave. She had made it clear that if she couldn't have the family's attention, then I would pay the price. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The sister who had always been the golden child of the family, the one who could do no wrong, had gone to these extreme lengths to destroy me. She hadn't just lied about me once or twice, she had made it her mission to ensure I would never be able to return home. She had built an entire world of deceit, and she had made sure it was solid enough to withstand the truth. But it wasn't just Monica's lies that hurt. It was the realization that my parents had never once questioned her. They had never looked beyond the story she told them. They had never asked me for my side of the story. They had chosen to believe her without a second thought, and in doing so, they had abandoned me completely. Aunt Ruth's voice broke through my thoughts. "Irene, I'm sorry for all of this. But you need to know that Monica has gone too far. She's been keeping the truth from your parents for years, and now they're starting to see it. But I don't know if it's too late." I sat there, stunned. Monica had destroyed my life without a second thought, and now it seemed like the pieces of the puzzle were finally falling into place. But the damage had already been done. I had built my life without my family's support, and now, even if the truth came out, I didn't know if I could ever trust them again. But then, Aunt Ruth dropped a bombshell. "She's in the hospital, Irene. Your sister's been in a serious car accident. And your parents, they're asking for you. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Monica, the sister who had ruined my life, was now in a position where she needed me. I didn't know how to feel about that. Part of me was still angry that she had torn my life apart, angry that she had made my parents believe the worst about me. But the other part of me, the part that had spent years trying to prove I was worth something, knew what I had to do. I was a surgeon. I had spent years learning how to save lives, how to heal others. And as much as it hurt, I knew that I couldn't walk away from her in her time of need. So, I made the decision to go. The hospital room was filled with the familiar sound of beeping machines, the sterile smell of antiseptic, and the weight of years of unresolved anger. I walked into that room, my heart heavy with confusion and resentment. But what I saw was something I hadn't expected. Monica, the sister who had betrayed me, was lying in that bed, unconscious, hooked up to a ventilator, and fighting for her life. And standing there were my parents, looking as though they had aged 10 years in a matter of minutes. Can you ever forgive someone who has destroyed your life? Stay with me as Irene faces the decision that will change everything. Standing in that sterile hospital room, I was caught between two emotions. Anger, yes, and a deep, biting resentment. But also something else, something unexpected. I was looking at Monica, the sister who had destroyed my life, lying there in the bed, unconscious and vulnerable. There was no arrogance in her eyes now, no calculated manipulation. Just fear. Fear for her life, for the very real possibility that she might not make it through the night. And my parents, they were standing there, looking lost. My mother, who had always been so composed, was holding my father's hand tightly, her knuckles white with the pressure. They both looked like they had aged 10 years in the span of a few minutes. It was as if the years of ignoring me, of siding with Monica's version of events, had finally caught up to them. Dr. Lett? The voice of the nurse pulled me from my thoughts. She had been standing at the door, waiting for my attention. We need to prep the patient for surgery. Are you ready? I looked at my sister once more. The woman who had lied to our parents, who had kept me at arm's length for years, and now here she was, in a hospital bed, unconscious, fighting for her life. I was the chief of trauma surgery at Mercy Rest Medical Center. It wasn't just a title, it was a responsibility. And now, here I was, facing a decision that could change everything. I had spent years building my life, brick by brick, without the support of my family. And now, after everything that had happened, the family that had erased me, the sister who had destroyed me, was in front of me, needing help. My mind raced, and for a moment, I was paralyzed. I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to walk away, to let someone else take the lead. I could have handed her case over to another surgeon. I could have let someone else save her life. After all, Monica had made sure that I was no longer part of the family, that I no longer mattered to them. Why should I help her now? But there was something inside me that wouldn't let me walk away. There was a duty, a moral obligation that I couldn't ignore. As much as Monica had betrayed me, as much as my parents had turned their backs on me, I couldn't leave her to die. I took a deep breath and nodded at the nurse. I'll take the lead. It wasn't easy. The operating room was filled with the sound of beeping machines, the sterile scent of antiseptic, and the hum of busy staff as I scrubbed in. My mind kept flashing back to the years of betrayal, the moments I had spent fighting for my family's recognition, the years Monica had spent lying about me, manipulating everyone she could. And yet, here I was, in the place where I had always found my purpose, saving lives. It didn't matter who this patient was. She was my responsibility now, and I had to do my job. The surgery was long and difficult, just as I had expected. Monica had suffered a ruptured spleen and a grade 3 liver laceration. Her blood pressure was dropping rapidly, and her chances of survival were slim. I worked methodically, making the necessary repairs, focusing on each task at hand. I didn't allow myself to think about the past, about the pain of being discarded by my family. All I could do was focus on saving her. Hours passed, and the surgery finally ended. Monica was stable. Her vitals had returned to normal, and the bleeding had stopped. I stepped out of the operating room, my hands still shaking slightly from the intensity of the procedure. The nurses were already preparing for the post-op care, and I knew I needed to speak to my parents. They were waiting outside the ICU, standing in the same spot where they had been when I first arrived. The look on their faces, relieved, yet still full of guilt, was almost unbearable. "Mom, Dad," I said, my voice steady but not without emotion, "she's stable. The surgery was successful, but it's still a long road to recovery. She'll need a lot of care and support." My mother nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "Irene, we're so sorry. We never should have believed her. We should have listened to you." Dad was quiet. His eyes were red, and I could tell he was struggling to process everything. After all these years of believing Monica's version of the story, hearing the truth now must have been a shock. But there was no time for me to explain everything. Not yet. The truth had always been clear to me, but now, standing in front of him, I realized something. I didn't have to explain myself anymore. The past was the past. What mattered now was what came next. "You don't have to apologize," I said quietly. "What matters now is that she's alive. That's all that matters. I'm not doing this for forgiveness. I'm doing this because it's my job." My mother's face crumpled. "But we failed you, Irene. We should have stood by you. We should have trusted you." I didn't know how to respond. The years of pain, of rejection, were still there. But in that moment, I made a decision. I wasn't going to carry the weight of their mistakes with me anymore. I had already built my life. I had already moved on from the family who had abandoned me. The door wasn't closed, but I was the one who would decide when it opened, how wide, and who could walk through. "Maybe one day we'll talk about it," I said, turning toward the ICU. "But right now, I need to check on Monica. I'll be back in a few minutes." I walked into the ICU room where Monica was still unconscious, surrounded by machines. Her face was pale, and her breathing was shallow, but she was alive. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to feel something other than anger. I didn't know if it was forgiveness, or something else entirely, but I knew one thing: it was a start. What happens when the person who betrayed you needs you the most? Keep reading, because the story is about to take another unexpected turn. The days following Monica's surgery felt like a blur. I had done my duty, saved her life, but nothing about it felt right. I was still reeling from the years of betrayal, the lies that had been fed to my parents, and the cold, silent rejection I had endured. But in that hospital room, staring at my sister as she lay unconscious, something in me began to shift. It wasn't forgiveness. I wasn't ready for that. I wasn't even sure I wanted to forgive her. The depth of the betrayal was too much, the scars too deep. But it was a step. A beginning of something I didn't quite understand yet. Monica remained in the ICU for several days, and each visit felt heavier than the last. My parents, still reeling from the shock of the truth, tried their best to stay out of the way, but I could see the guilt written on their faces. They were walking around like strangers in their own lives. They had believed their daughter's lies for so long, and now they were faced with the full weight of their ignorance. I didn't have the answers for them. I didn't know how to fix it, or if it could even be fixed. But what I did know was that this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about Monica. It was about saving her, because she needed help, whether she deserved it or not. I had put my emotions aside long enough to operate on her, to do my job. I couldn't let my personal feelings get in the way of her recovery, just as I hadn't when she was lying in front of me, fighting for her life. I spent the next few days hovering between the operating room, the ICU, and my apartment. Every moment felt like it was stretching out into eternity, and I couldn't escape the weight of the decisions that had been made. Monica's condition stabilized, but it was clear that the road to recovery wouldn't be easy. My mind constantly returned to the thought of my parents, and the void between us. The family I once knew was gone. We were all different people now, wearing the weight of the years we had lost, the lies we had let fester. I knew that, eventually, I would have to face them, but right now, all I could do was wait for Monica to wake up. I knew that when she did, we would have to face the truth, together, for the first time in 5 years. And when that moment finally came, I wasn't sure I was ready. It was a Thursday morning when Monica woke up. Her eyes fluttered open, and she looked around the room, her gaze briefly landing on the machines, the IVs, and then finally resting on me. "Irene?" Her voice was weak, barely a whisper. The harsh reality of her condition hit me all over again. I stood at the foot of her bed, unsure of how to approach her. I had spent years building walls between us, years of anger, years of silence. I had sworn to myself that I would never let her back in. But now, as she lay there, broken and vulnerable, I realized something. This wasn't about me anymore. It was about the person lying in front of me, the person who, despite everything, was still my sister. "Yeah, it's me," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "How are you feeling?" She blinked several times, trying to focus on my face. Her breathing was shallow, her body still recovering from the trauma. I could see the fear in her eyes, the realization that she had almost lost everything. But there was something else there too, a hesitation, as if she wasn't sure what to say, how to bridge the chasm that had formed between us. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice shaky. "I never meant for any of this to happen." I froze. My heart tightened in my chest. These were words I had never expected to hear from her. The Monica I knew, the Monica who had betrayed me, who had manipulated everyone into believing her version of events, wasn't capable of this kind of vulnerability. But here she was, broken and apologizing for something I never thought she would admit. But was it enough? Could 5 years of lies, betrayal, and rejection be undone by a few words? Was an apology enough to repair the damage she had done? "I never meant to hurt you," she continued, her voice barely audible now. "I was scared, Irene. I wanted everything you had. I wanted the family's love, and I didn't know how to deal with the fact that you were getting it. I was afraid of losing everything, so I made sure you didn't have it." Her confession hung in the air between us, thick with the weight of the years that had passed. I could feel the familiar rush of anger, the heat of betrayal that I had carried with me for so long. But something in me softened. Maybe it was the exhaustion of everything I had been through, or maybe it was the recognition that this was the only chance I had to confront her. "You lied about me, Monica," I said quietly, the words finally escaping my lips. "You made them believe I was a failure. You made them cut me out of their lives. You made me invisible. And you've been doing it for years." Her eyes filled with tears, and she nodded. "I know," she whispered. "And I'm sorry. I never realized how much I hurt you until now. I can't change the past, but I want to make it right." The words hung in the air. And for a moment, I didn't know what to say. I didn't know if I could forgive her. I didn't know if forgiveness was even possible. But one thing was clear, Monica was no longer the same person who had betrayed me so completely. And whether or not I could forgive her, I was the one who had the power to decide what came next. Can you ever truly forgive someone who has torn your life apart? Keep reading, because the next step in Irene's journey will be the hardest yet. Monica's apology hung in the sterile air of the hospital room like an unspoken challenge. The words she had spoken, those painful, trembling admissions, were ones I never thought I'd hear from her. For 5 years, I had believed that Monica was incapable of facing the truth, let alone admitting her role in the pain she had caused. But there she was, vulnerable and contrite, lying in a hospital bed, fighting for her life, and asking for forgiveness. "I don't know if I can forgive you," I said quietly, the words feeling like stones in my throat. "What you did? It's not something I can just forget." Monica's eyes welled with tears as she reached out weakly, her fingers trembling. "I know. I didn't expect you to forgive me right away. I needed you to know that I'm sorry. That I realize what I did was wrong. I didn't just hurt you, I hurt everyone. I hurt our parents. I hurt myself." I stood still, staring at her. My heart felt like it was caught in a vice, my emotions twisted up in a knot that I couldn't untangle. The anger, the betrayal, the years of hurt, they were still there, raw and fresh. But there was something else too. A small, unexpected spark of something I hadn't felt in a long time. Was it hope? Was it the chance for healing that I had long since given up on? "I never wanted to hurt you, Irene," Monica continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I was scared. Scared of losing everything. I thought that if I could keep you out of the picture, if I could make everyone think you were the one who had left us, that I could keep my place. I know that doesn't make it right. I know that now." Her confession was a lot to take in. I had spent so many years building walls around myself, convincing myself that I didn't need my family, that I didn't need anyone. I had convinced myself that I could stand on my own, that their betrayal wasn't something I should dwell on. But now, faced with Monica's raw vulnerability, I found myself questioning everything. I had always dreamed of having the kind of relationship with Monica that I saw other sisters have, the kind where you could lean on each other for support, the kind where you could be honest without fear of judgment. For so long, I had believed that would never happen. But now, as I watched her lying there, fighting to recover from the accident, I realized that maybe, just maybe, there was a possibility of something different. "I'm not sure I can trust you again," I said, my voice firm. "You've lied to me, to Mom, to Dad. You've torn our family apart. And I don't know if I can ever get past that." Monica's face crumpled. She closed her eyes, the weight of my words sinking in. "I understand," she whispered. "I don't expect you to trust me right away. I don't deserve that trust. But I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make it right. I'll do whatever it takes." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to yell, to scream at her for everything she had put me through. But another part of me, the part that still wanted a relationship with her, the part that had always yearned for my family's love, wanted to believe her. Could I really forgive her? Could I really let go of the years of hurt and betrayal? But as I stood there, staring at my sister, broken, vulnerable, and finally admitting her wrongs, I realized something. Forgiveness wasn't about excusing what she had done. It wasn't about forgetting the past. Forgiveness was about moving forward. It was about finding peace, not for her, but for myself. "I don't know if I can forgive you today, Monica," I said softly, the weight of my words settling between us. But I'm willing to try. I'm willing to start the process. I'm willing to listen. She nodded, her eyes full of gratitude, though I could see the tears streaming down her face. That's all I can ask for. I'll prove to you that I can change. That I can be the sister you always deserved. I didn't know if it was the right decision, but for the first time in years, I felt like I was making a choice for myself, not because I had to, not because I was expected to, but because I wanted to. It wasn't about fixing everything in one day. It wasn't about pretending that everything was okay. It was about allowing the possibility of healing, of rebuilding something broken. And that was enough. As the days passed, Monica slowly regained her strength. She remained in the hospital for several weeks, and during that time, I visited her daily. We talked about everything, about the past, about the lies, about the pain. But we also talked about the future. We talked about the possibility of being sisters again, of finding a way back to each other after everything that had happened. But what really surprised me was that the more we talked, the more I realized that the person who needed healing the most wasn't just Monica. It was me. I had spent so many years holding on to my anger, my pain, that I had never allowed myself the space to heal. I knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Trust wouldn't come quickly. The scars left by the years of betrayal wouldn't disappear overnight. But as I walked out of the hospital that day, I felt something that I hadn't felt in years: hope. Hope for the future. Hope for a chance at rebuilding. Not just my relationship with Monica, but my relationship with myself. Can Irene rebuild the trust that was shattered? Will forgiveness bring healing or further heartbreak? Keep reading because the journey of rebuilding is just beginning. It had been a few weeks since Monica woke up from surgery. She was still recovering, still weak, but she was alive. That was the most important thing. The trauma of the accident and the surgeries she had endured had taken their toll, and yet, there she was, fighting to heal, fighting for a chance at redemption. But it wasn't just Monica who was healing. I was, too. Every day I visited her in the hospital, I felt myself softening, letting go of the anger I had carried for so long. It wasn't easy. In fact, it was probably the hardest thing I'd ever done. Monica's betrayal was not something I could just forget. The lies she told our parents, the years of my life she had manipulated and erased from their memory, those wounds weren't easily healed. But as I sat by her side, as she told me stories about her childhood, about her own fears and insecurities, I began to understand her in a way I never had before. For the first time, Monica wasn't just the sister who hurt me. She wasn't just the person who had torn apart our family. She was a human being, struggling with her own demons, trying to find her way back after years of mistakes. And, though it wasn't easy, I started to see that she was trying, really trying. She wasn't asking for forgiveness right away. She wasn't asking me to pretend that everything was okay. She was just asking for a chance. A chance to be the person she could have been, had she not been so blinded by fear and jealousy. One afternoon, as I sat in her hospital room, I noticed how much quieter the air felt. There was something different about Monica. She wasn't just fighting for her life physically anymore, but emotionally, too. We had spent years in silence, years in which I had kept her at arm's length. But now, as I looked at her, I realized I had been doing the same thing for myself. I had kept my heart locked away, refusing to feel anything because I was afraid of getting hurt again. Irene, Monica said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. I've been thinking a lot. I know I can't undo the damage I've caused. I know I can't make up for the lies, for the years I took from you. But I'm asking for one thing, a chance to prove to you that I can be the sister you need. The sister you deserve. I looked at her, trying to hold back the emotions that surged within me. I had spent so much time thinking about revenge, about how I could make her pay for what she had done. But now, standing in front of me, was a woman who was finally acknowledging her wrongs, who was finally admitting the truth. And I realized something in that moment: I didn't need revenge. I didn't need to make her suffer the way I had. What I needed was closure. What I needed was to move forward, not just for her, but for me. "I don't know if I can ever trust you again, Monica," I said slowly, my voice steady but full of the weight of everything that had happened. "But I'm willing to try. I'm willing to see where this goes. I'm willing to let you prove that you can be the person I always wanted you to be. Not for Mom and Dad, not for anyone else, just for me." Monica's eyes filled with tears, and for the first time I saw the vulnerability in her that I had never seen before. She had always been the strong one, the one who had everyone wrapped around her finger. But now, in her hospital bed, I saw her for who she truly was: someone who had made mistakes, someone who had lost her way, but someone who was still capable of change. "I will," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I'll prove it. I swear I will." It wasn't an instant fix. Trust takes time, and healing takes even longer. But for the first time in years, I felt like a door had opened. It wasn't fully open, not yet, but there was a crack. And sometimes, that's all you need to begin the process of rebuilding. Over the next few weeks, I visited Monica every day. We talked about everything: about our childhood, about the years of silence, about the lies she had told. It was painful, to say the least. But it was necessary. We needed to face the past before we could move forward. Monica made amends with our parents, and though it wasn't an easy conversation, they started to see the truth. Slowly, over time, they began to understand that I hadn't abandoned them. That it had been Monica who had shaped their perception of me. But the healing wasn't just about family, it was about me, too. For the first time, I allowed myself to feel the weight of my own anger, my own pain, and then, slowly, I let it go. I realized that forgiveness wasn't about excusing someone's actions, it was about freeing myself from the chains of resentment that had bound me for so long. In the months that followed, Monica and I rebuilt our relationship, one conversation at a time. It wasn't easy, and there were times when I wanted to give up. But I knew I couldn't keep holding on to the past. I couldn't keep letting her betrayal define who I was. And then, one day, Monica did something that made all the difference. She called me, and for the first time in years, I heard her voice without any trace of manipulation, without any of the usual charm or performance. She was just Monica. "Irene," she said, "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I hope, one day, you'll see me for who I am now. Not the person I was, but the person I'm trying to be." That's when I realized, Monica wasn't just asking for forgiveness. She was asking for a chance to be a sister again. And maybe, just maybe, I was ready to give her that chance. Can Irene and Monica rebuild their relationship after years of lies and betrayal? Keep reading to find out if forgiveness and healing can truly overcome the past. The months that followed Monica's recovery were nothing like what I had expected. In many ways, I had imagined that once she was awake, once the surgery was over, everything would go back to normal. That we would be able to pick up where we left off as sisters, and that the years of silence and betrayal would somehow fade away like a bad dream. But life, as I was learning, doesn't work that way. Healing is not a linear process, and it doesn't happen overnight. Monica and I continued to spend time together. At first, it felt awkward. The easy camaraderie we had once shared as kids was gone. Every conversation felt like a test, and every word I said to her seemed to hang in the air like an unspoken question: Is this the beginning of our healing, or the beginning of another lie? And then, one day, Monica called me out of the blue. Irene, can we talk? Her voice was soft, and there was a vulnerability in it that made my heart skip a beat. For the first time in a long time, it didn't feel like she was performing. It didn't feel like she was putting on a show. It was just her. I'm here, I said, my voice steady but full of emotions I wasn't quite ready to confront. We met at a small cafe, a neutral spot where we could sit, away from the chaos of our family dynamics. I watched her carefully as she took a seat across from me, her eyes tired but determined. She hadn't changed much physically, still the same Monica I had grown up with. But there was something different in the way she looked at me now. It wasn't pity, or judgment, or manipulation. It was something close to sincerity. Something I hadn't seen in her for years. I want you to know, she began, her voice shaking slightly, I've been going to therapy. It's been hard, really hard. But I need to face everything. I need to understand why I did what I did. And why I pushed you away. I felt my breath catch in my throat. Therapy. Monica had always been the one who had it all figured out, the one who didn't need help. She had prided herself on being the golden child, the one who could handle everything on her own. To hear her say that she was seeking help, that she was finally confronting the lies she had told herself and the people she had hurt, was a revelation. But as much as I wanted to be angry, as much as I wanted to hold on to the pain she had caused, I felt something else instead. A small spark of hope. Not for our past, but for our future. Could we really start over? Could we rebuild a relationship that had been torn apart by years of lies? You're doing the right thing, I said quietly. But I can't pretend like it's all okay now. I can't pretend that the years of silence, the years of being ignored and erased, don't matter. Monica nodded. Her eyes were brimming with tears, but she didn't let them fall. I know. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm not asking you to forget. I just need you to see that I'm trying. I don't want to be the person who hurt you anymore. I want to be better. And I want to be a part of your life again. But I know it's going to take time. There it was again, the sincerity in her voice, the quiet admission that she understood the gravity of what she had done. Monica wasn't asking for forgiveness in that moment. She wasn't trying to rush me or push me into something I wasn't ready for. She was simply acknowledging that what she had done was wrong, and that, despite everything, she was willing to change. And for the first time in years, I believed her. I had spent so long fighting against my anger, building walls to protect myself from the hurt, that I never allowed myself the space to truly feel the possibility of healing. Forgiveness, I realized, wasn't about erasing the past or pretending it never happened. It was about choosing to move forward, despite everything. I'm not sure where this is going, Monica, I said slowly, my voice trembling just a little. But I'm willing to try. I'm willing to start again. For us. For me. Monica's face softened, and a tear finally slipped down her cheek. She reached across the table, placing her hand on mine. It wasn't much, but it was enough. It was the first step toward the kind of relationship I had always dreamed of having with her. I'll do whatever it takes, Irene, she whispered. I'll prove to you that I'm not that person anymore. I swear I will. We sat in silence for a while, letting the weight of everything we had said sink in. It wasn't easy. It wasn't perfect. But it was real. And that was more than I had ever expected. Over the next few months, things began to shift. Slowly but surely, Monica and I started to rebuild our relationship. It wasn't a smooth process. There were still moments of tension, moments where the old wounds resurfaced. But we talked. We communicated in ways we never had before. And for the first time, I felt like we were truly seeing each other for who we really were, not the versions we had created in our minds, but the people we had become. I wasn't ready to forget the past, but I was ready to let go of the anger. I was ready to stop letting it define me. And as time went on, I found myself healing in ways I hadn't expected. Not just from the betrayal, but from the years of silence, from the resentment, from the fear that I wasn't enough. The door to my family, the door that I had closed so tightly, was slowly beginning to open again. But this time, I was in control of when it opened, how wide, and who walked through. Can Irene truly rebuild what was broken, or will the weight of the past keep her from moving forward? Stay with us, because this story isn't over yet. As the months passed, things between Monica and me gradually shifted. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't smooth. We still had moments where the weight of the past would hang over us, threatening to pull us back into the chaos of betrayal and silence. But we worked through it, piece by piece. Slowly, I began to trust again, not just Monica, but myself. Monica had started seeing a therapist, as she had promised. She was doing the hard work, the kind of work she had always avoided, and for the first time, I saw her truly facing herself. It wasn't easy. She wasn't perfect, but she was trying, and that made all the difference. Every conversation, every apology, every moment of honesty between us was a small piece of a much larger puzzle, one we had both spent years trying to avoid. The breakthrough came one evening, several months after her recovery. We were sitting on the porch of my house, the sun beginning to set and cast a soft, golden light over the yard. It was a simple moment, but it felt significant. Monica, for the first time, wasn't just the sister who betrayed me. She wasn't just the person who caused me so much pain. She was sitting beside me, finally opening up about her own struggles, her own fears, and her own regrets. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said to me, Irene," Monica began, her voice quiet but steady. "About how it's not about forgetting the past, but about moving forward. I've been holding on to so much guilt, so much shame for what I did to you. But the truth is, I can't change what happened. I can't take back the years I stole from you." I nodded, my heart heavy with the weight of those words. "You can't, Monica. But I've learned that holding on to the anger, holding on to the past, it wasn't doing me any good. It was just keeping me stuck." Monica turned to face me, her eyes filled with a vulnerability that was almost unfamiliar to me. "I know I hurt you, and I know it's going to take time for things to be the way they were. But I hope, one day, you'll be able to look at me and see me for who I am now. Not for the person I was." I looked at her, truly looked at her for the first time in a long time. I saw the sister I had grown up with, the one who had once been my best friend, the one I had shared everything with. I saw the woman who had hurt me so deeply, but I also saw the woman who was now doing everything she could to heal, to be better, to make things right. "I don't know if we'll ever get back to what we were," I said quietly, my voice breaking slightly. "But I do know that I'm willing to try. I'm willing to see who you are now, and who I am now. And I'm willing to forgive you, not because I have to, but because I want to." Monica's eyes filled with tears, and for the first time in a long time, she reached out to me, not in manipulation, not in performance, but as a sister who had finally realized what it meant to truly be seen. "Irene, I love you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "And I'll spend the rest of my life proving that I'm the sister you always deserved." For a long time, I had believed that forgiveness was a gift I had to give someone else. But I had come to realize that forgiveness wasn't just for Monica. It was for me, too. It was about freeing myself from the chains of resentment, from the weight of the past that had held me back for so long. The next few months were a blur of family therapy sessions, conversations, and rebuilding. My parents, though hesitant at first, began to see the truth. They started to understand the depth of the pain they had caused me, the years of silence that had broken us all. But they also began to see the possibility of healing. And in that, they gave me the space I needed to decide what kind of relationship I wanted with them. It wasn't easy. There were still moments when the past felt like a heavy weight on my shoulders. But as time passed, I realized that forgiveness wasn't just a single moment. It was a process, a long, difficult journey that didn't have a clear endpoint. But it was a journey worth taking, for both Monica and me. One afternoon, I was standing at the front door of my house when Monica knocked. She had driven up from Hartford to visit, and there she was, no longer the sister who had betrayed me, but the sister I had always hoped to have. "Irene," she said with a tentative smile, "I've been thinking. I've made so many mistakes, but I want you to know that I'll always be here. No matter what happens." And for the first time in a long time, I realized that it wasn't about fixing everything. It wasn't about erasing the past or pretending it never happened. It was about moving forward, one step at a time, with the people who truly mattered. It was about choosing to rebuild, not because it was easy, but because it was worth it. This is the end of my story, but maybe it's the beginning of yours. If you've ever struggled with forgiveness, with family, or with betrayal, know that healing is possible. It's not easy, and it's not quick, but it starts with one choice, one step forward. Let me know in the comments if this story resonated with you, and share your own journey of forgiveness and healing. And if you haven't already, subscribe for more stories that inspire, challenge, and move us toward growth. Thank you for reading. I'll see you next time.